So, welcome back to the short Dvar Torah on the Parsha of the week. This week is Parshat Yisro or Yitro, Jethro, and here we focus on a little or a short lesson. If you really want to know the portion of the week, we encourage you to do so by reading about the portion of the week. There's plenty of places. You can definitely go to our website at coralspringschabad.org and read up so much on the Parsha. But here we're focusing again on one short thought. And this week, the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments, which is a monumental moment in the history of man, because it was this communication that changed all of history and gave the world its morality, including the United States, where much of the law is based on the Torah, Talmudic thinking, and so on. But I want to connect last week's portion and this week's portion, which is, last week we read about the actual Exodus. We read about the splitting of the sea. And right after the splitting of the sea and the Jews sing to God about the splitting of the sea, the men, the women, we find that the Torah relates the following episode, that the Jews traveled for 3 days, and then the Torah says, I'll say it in Hebrew and then I'll translate. Then the Torah says, V'lo yochlu lishtot mayim. They came to a place called Morah, and they could not drink the water ki morim heim, because the water is bitter. Morim, mar, means bitter. Ki morim heim, heim here is the plural for water, like mayim means water, but it's in the plural sense. Ki morim heim, because they were bitter. And that's the simple meaning that the water was bitter. And then the Torah continues that God showed Moses an eitz, which could be translated as a tree or a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became sweet, and the Jews were able to drink. That's the story. And the question here is the obvious: what's the story of this tree? How did it make it sweet? And some more details, which commentaries talk about. We're here, we want to focus on one thought, which is this thought of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov says something very beautiful that we all know. But it's good to hear it and see it in the Parsha. And it connects with this week's Parsha, the giving of the Torah. The Baal Shem Tov says, the Baal Shem Tov is the founder of the Hasidic movement, says the following. When the Torah tells us they could not drink water, ki morim heim, because they were bitter, you could also read the verse that they were bitter, not that the water was bitter, but that the Jews were bitter. And when someone is bitter, even water, which is so-called tasteless, it's not a piece of steak, it's not ice cream, it's not sushi, it's water. But if you are bitter, then everything around you tastes bitter. Even the water tastes bitter. And therefore the Baal Shem Tov reads this verse, V'lo yochlu lishtot mayim, they could not drink water, ki morim heim. Not that the water was bitter, but ki morim heim, the Jews were bitter. Because they were bitter, the water tasted as bitter. There's a story that brings home this point. There's a story with the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Shneis, and he was the 6th Rebbe in the line of Rebbes, of Chabad Rebbes. Actually, last week we celebrated commemorated his yahrzeit. And the 6th Chabad Rebbe was extremely involved in running Judaism throughout the Soviet Union and Poland, undercover, because the communists forbid it, and he really had constantly reports sort of from all these communities, and he tried to make sure that there are yeshivas and underground cheder, teaching Jewish children aleph bet and mikvahs and just Jewish institutions. And this was in Poland. I think it was regarding Odessa. And he had 2 people that came from Odessa. And they came into the previous Rebbe to give him a report, because he always wanted to hear a report of the Jewish communities. They asked him he asked them about Odessa. So the first person tells the previous Rebbe, Odessa, people are coming to the synagogue. Jewish community is doing nice programs. They get together for Shabbat. There are things happening, good stuff happening. And the previous Rebbe gives him 2 ruble, thanks him for the report. The other guy standing on the side says, you know what? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to just say something because, I just want it to be nice. I'm going to say it as is. And he tells the previous Chabad Rebbe, he says And look, things are not great. Only a small percentage comes to the synagogue. The Jewish community is not that united. There are disagreements going on. There's problems. And he lists a whole list of problems. The previous rabbi says, thank you. And he's waiting for his 2 ruble because the guy in front of him got his 2 ruble and it's not coming forth. So he says to the previous rabbi, why am I not getting the 2 rubles? My colleague just got 2 rubles, but I was honest. I gave you the truth. So the previous rabbi said to him the following. I think this is a very sort of poignant story. He said, look, I know what's going on in Odessa. I get reports all the time. What I wanted to hear from the 2 of you is in which Odessa the 2 of you are living. I heard the Odessa the first fellow is living, and now I hear the Odessa that you are living. So very much of a situation depends on how you are and how you are living it, where you are living it, what your approach is, what your attitude is. There's the known story. Any salesperson knows the story about, I guess, Florisheim, who sends representatives to Africa to sell shoes. And one fellow comes back and they ask him, okay, how did you do? He says, how did I do? Terrible. Nobody wears shoes. Everybody goes barefoot. Their feet are hard on the bottom. Nobody wants shoes. And the second guy comes back. They ask him, how is it? And he says, it's fantastic. Nobody wears shoes. Everybody is a potential customer. Everybody bought shoes for me. I made a sale. I couldn't sell enough shoes. So this, the Baal Shem Tov is telling us, is what the Torah is telling us over here. Ki marim heim, they were bitter. And therefore the water was bitter. Which Odessa we live in is up to us. And that also explains the rest of the story where God shows Moshe an eitz. And he throws it into the water and it becomes sweet. This is a very important lesson as well. The eitz here refers symbolically or metaphorically to the eitz that we sing about whenever we raise the Torah. Eitz chayim hi lamachazikim, but the eitz here refers to the Torah. And God is telling the Jewish people and telling us, if you want your life not to be bitter, you want to have a more positive perspective of life, you need to connect to the Torah. The Torah gives us meaning. The Torah gives us purpose. The Torah gives us insight and disconnects us from so much of the materialism that we're drawn to. And by doing so, all of a sudden, we have a whole different sense of priority on life, and things that perhaps before would make us bitter, we realize how insignificant it is. And we realize that life is not just about ourselves and our own self-gratification. Life is about what we do, which is in terms of self-improvement, being a human being, being better, altruistic, or how we help others. And Torah gives us that higher perspective. So by Hashem, with that eitz, with the eitz chayim hi, everything changes. Our whole perspective changes. And that's this week's Parsha. So let's connect to Torah. Today it is so easy for each one of us. We are what we take in. Take a few moments. Go to this. There's so much Torah teaching available for everybody, whether it's on YouTube, whether it's on so many sites, coralsprings.chabad.org. There's thousands of classes that you could listen to and download, and let us enhance our lives. And by doing so, we will make ourselves happier human beings, ourselves and our family. Everybody should have a wonderful Shabbat Shalom in a couple of days. But this is the Parsha. Share it at your Shabbat table, and it's great. Thank you for the opportunity. All the best.